Was the attempted Trump assassination an inside job? The gun I'm holding right now makes me wonder. This is an AR-15, very similar to the one that was used by Trump's shooter, and it is not a sniper rifle.
The AR-15 is more of a mid-range tactical weapon. It's used for general purpose shooting rather than long-range precision shooting. The bullet size is also a lot smaller than, say, a .308 that would be used in a bolt-action sniper rifle.
Now, the actual rifle was a DPMS AR-15 purchased over a decade ago. Now, they haven't released any pictures of the rifle itself. It's still going under forensics. The investigation is ongoing. But a big question is whether it had a scope or not. Now, if it did have a scope, that would be an even bigger breach of security. So you can't just slap a scope on a rifle. You have to zero it for the yardage that you're shooting. When using a scope, you have to adjust for distance, windage, and elevation. Now, the shooter was spotted up to half an hour before the shooting using a rangefinder to try to find the distance.
A sniper from a local tactical team deployed to assist the U.S. Secret Service at former President Donald Trump's rally on Saturday took a picture of the gunman and saw him looking through a rangefinder minutes before he tried to assassinate Donald Trump. Now, a rangefinder does have magnification, but it's a single lens. It doesn't look like a pair of binoculars. Most law enforcement, especially Secret Service, should know that someone using a rangefinder is trying to determine TBR. TBR is true ballistic range, which is essentially the horizontal distance between you and your target. Now, if you're decent at math and a decent shooter, you can figure out your TBR with some simple mathematic calculations. But a much easier and more efficient way to accomplish this is to use a rangefinder. A rangefinder has an internal calculator that runs the numbers for you. All you have to do is range the target, dial it in, and start shooting. According to reports, the shooter visited Clairton Sportsman's Club 48 hours earlier to practice shooting on a 200-yard rifle range, well within the 147-yard distance from the actual shooting, to sight in his scope for his assassination attempt. Now, determining if this rifle had optics is like finding Bigfoot. It is nearly impossible to tell. Now, even if the shooter had a high-precision scope, let's talk about the talent of the shooter. Crook was reportedly barred from his high school rifle team. He had such bad aim he was considered dangerous and a potential risk for accidentally harming his teammates. He was also a member of a sportsman's club where he often went to shoot with his father over the weekend. And when he was shot and killed, he was wearing a t-shirt from Demolition Ranch, a popular firearms YouTube channel. Authorities recovered 20 firearms from the home where he lived with his parents. There's an indication that he was an avid shooter, however, a pretty piss-poor one. Here is the key question. If this was really an inside job, if this was the deep state, why would they give this monumental task to a 20-year-old poor marksman using an AR-15 with iron sights? Wouldn't they not only choose someone who was an expert marksman, but also supply them with a high-precision rifle? That part doesn't add up for being an inside job. More likely, it was a catastrophic failure by the Secret Service to secure the perimeter around Trump. Let's check out Task and Purpose for a quick explanation of how security broke down.
How was a 20-year-old able to defeat Secret Service security measures that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and get onto a rooftop within 150 meters of Trump, then fire multiple shots? Are my tax dollars going straight into a dumpster fire? This
Correct.
Isn't a knock on the incredibly brave and fast response by many officers. This video is focused on two main pre-planning operational failures in security based on new reports, eyewitness accounts, and statements from officials close to the rally security planning. The first security failure happened at 5:40 p.m., about half an hour before the shooting, when a local police officer spotted a suspicious-looking man holding a rangefinder at the entrance to the rally. A rangefinder is a small device that you can look through like a scope or binoculars. You press a button on it and it digitally gives you the exact distance of a target that you're aiming at. The suspect was pacing around outside the metal detectors at the bag area check. Officers thought maybe the device was just to observe the speech and the rally better.
I've been to many concerts, sporting events, rallies. I have never seen someone using a rangefinder as a set of binoculars. You'd essentially be spending the event with one eye closed. I mean, how suspicious do I look right now?
The officer put out a message, though, over the radio net to warn everyone of this sus behavior. which was passed along to Secret Service and other agencies. Now, AP reported that police officers then lost sight of him in the crowd as they tried to follow him. According to John Miller, a former senior FBI agent, people had his description and were looking around for him.
Also, according to John Miller, this was a suspicious individual, but law enforcement acted under the Graham v. Connor excessive force ruling, which generally states the amount of force should be equal to the threat.
We want to know exactly who is in power, who's responsible for this oversight, and we want them held accountable. To get there, though, we have a lot of questions, and so far, the answers we're getting do not look good. So what happened next is the shooter made his way from the event security around the AGR building perimeter, and he was able to breach it without being apprehended.
There's also records of the shooter purchasing a ladder. Now, it's unclear whether or not he used said ladder, but if he's able to get a whole ass ladder in the perimeter, then that's even more embarrassing than it already is.
This is the second pre-planning major security failure. Because beforehand, they're supposed to lock all the doors and make sure there's no way to gain roof access and post officers around the building and on top of it. Let's take a closer look at the complex of 4 separate buildings at 615 Whitestone Road, where he fired from. Google Maps Street View actually shows us the parking lot, and we can see there are multiple locations just in the 2 seconds of looking here where someone could jump up on top of that storage shed, for instance, and get to the rooftop, even without a ladder.
What an obvious vulnerability. Unbelievable.
This occurred on a Saturday after 6 p.m., so the building was likely closed, which means it should have been easy to spot anyone acting sus around here walking around because there shouldn't have been employees over there. Secret Service spokesperson Anthony Guglielmi said that the agency had designated that specific rooftop to be under the jurisdiction of law enforcement. Director of Secret Service Kimberly Cheadle, in charge of the whole Secret Service, said, quote, "There was local police in that building. There was local police in the area that was responsible for the outer perimeter of the building, fully in charge of." I feel like the only thing I would need to complete my blame game bingo card is if someone comes out and says mistakes were made. What happened next is shocking to watch, not because it's graphic, but because it's hard to imagine how this failure in perimeter security in advance could happen.
This video was synced up, I think it was 1 minute and 57 seconds. Since he was spotted on the roof until he started firing.
It would have been possible they couldn't tell if the suspect had a rifle in hand and wanted to fire on them. They might have dispatched officers on the ground to check and confirm. I've had some time to process what has happened, and personally I feel like if you're on a restricted rooftop within 150 meters of the president, even if you're just holding your dick in your hand, you're asking to get brained.
Again, we go back to the legal implications of Graham v. Connor. If someone truly was just up on top of the building and got his head blown off just for being there, it would be a clear case of excessive force. So with Graham v. Connor, what's looked at is if the use of force was excessive or reasonable. A lot of liberals will cry about police officers shooting people coming at them with knives. But once any kind of deadly weapon is introduced, the use of deadly force is considered reasonable. This was a very bad scenario. The Secret Service perimeter had been compromised. They didn't have confirmation on the rifle, yet, in essence, this was a clusterfuck.
This is what happened next. 2 local officers were already looking for the shooter due to what happened at the metal detectors. One officer was hoisted up by his partner by standing on his hands so he could look out over the edge of the roof to get eyes on the suspect. The second officer on the roof had both of his hands holding himself up in like a pull-up position to peer out onto the rooftop. So they encountered the shooter while he was on that roof. The gunman turned around and pointed his rifle directly at the officer, so the officer fell back down to avoid getting shot in the face. That's when the shooter took aim and fired at Trump.
Reports say the officer also sustained a pretty severe injury to his ankle when he fell off the roof, and the shooter was a story up. I put no blame on these officers who were trying to react to a person who should not have been there in the first place.
Now, Fox News spoke with Bill Gage. He's a 13-year veteran of the Secret Service, and Bill said, quote, "Just because someone's on a roof doesn't mean the counter sniper guys can just open fire. They operate under Graham v. Connor use of force rules." So what that means is that legally they would have to have perceived a threat in order to pull triggers and not end up getting thrown into jail potentially later. So people are going to be asking questions about the rules of engagement, use of force. Should that change? or should the Secret Service be given more resources? As more information is coming out, we're learning that there may have been a total of 4 counter-sniper teams in place throughout the rally. Reports indicate that one team was located on the building behind Trump, another team was located closer to the crowd. It's unclear which team effectively engaged the shooter at this point.
This is a moot point, right? This is a non-issue. The issue is that the shooter should not have been allowed within this distance of Trump in the first place. You could have 1 million snipers lined up in a row. You'd probably get the same outcome. Here's why if he had a scope, it'd be an even bigger screw up. It's one thing to sneak up to 150 yards of Trump with an AR-15. It's a completely another thing to be able to go to the event with a rangefinder and determine your ballistic range without ever being stopped by law enforcement.
Another team of police were said to have been actually located inside the building that the shooter was on, which somehow makes all of this worse.
John Miller, a chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst, said a key factor in protective planning is figuring out which structures have a line of sight to the protectee, especially if that also includes high ground, a window, or a rooftop. This building encompassed all those elements, and it was within a very viable range for a rifle shot. Ultimately, we'll never know, but I think that the shooter used an AR-15 because he was an amateur and didn't trust his abilities to hit the first shot. The AR-15 has a 30-round magazine. With a fully loaded magazine, the shooter effectively had 30 chances to hit Trump instead of 2 or 3 on a traditional bolt-action rifle. And the shooter was able to get off several shots before he was taken out. They also found explosive devices in his car. In my opinion, this was not an inside job. It was not the deep state. This was a troubled, misguided young man who wanted to inflict as much damage as possible before being taken out of this world.
Obviously, the full reports have not come out yet. It's still an ongoing investigation, but a lot of things just don't add up. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, and I'll see you next time on Conservative Vibes.
If you guys would like to support the channel, we have We Will Not Fall yard signs, stickers, and t-shirts. Sport one of the greatest photos of all time and show your support for Trump and for America. These shirts are unisex. They run true to size, small through 3XL, made in the USA. Snag one now at conservativevibes.com or click the link down below.